Hi, I'm Kayleigh Frost, Head of Clinical Support at Health Assured. You're listening to Peace of Mind. Today I'm joined by Emma Neville, person-centred counsellor and accredited menopause coach. We're going to be discussing menopause today and hopefully bust some myths, give some further insight and hopefully give some practical guidance to those of you that are listening and watching. So thank you for joining me, Emma. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. So tell me a little bit about yourself, how you've got to the stage where you are now as an accredited menopause coach, person-centred counsellor, and why you've joined me today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to keep a long story short if I can. I'll try my best. So yes, I was studying to become a counsellor in 2019 at the end of my course, and I had to get a placement and do 100 client hours. And then the lovely lockdown, which we all hated, came along. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, everything changed. It changed for us all, I know that. But as well, I had to go online working, then learn different platforms, different, programs to learn, different ways. Our tutor also left, so we were supporting each other as a group. And I just felt like I was really stressed and how was I ever going to get to the end of, doing this?
How long had you got left?
So I only had about 6-ish months, I think, that we had left,
Like the final stretch.
It wasn't long, it was a final stretch, getting the actual big portfolio finished. And I was on 2 placements, so I had to have kind of 2 as well, so there's a lot of work to be done. And I was just experiencing, many different symptoms really, but to start with, I was getting at nights some palpitations, where I would just get a couple of few flutters, and I just thought, what are those? Not used to those. And then it started quite a few different ones really, but I was just felt so lost when I go to bed, and I just was seeing every hour of the clock. The insomnia came, and I just thought, this is just not right. I had noticed some changes, obviously. Within my periods, I'd been stopped for quite a good few months. I just put that down to a lack in, in stress and things that can be stopped. So I just thought, this isn't right. This isn't, these symptoms aren't correct. So I need to get some advice. So I went to see my doctor, and I have a really good relationship with my doctor actually, which isn't always the case, I understand. But I went with my symptoms and, just a few things. So we ran some blood tests. And like a lot of them do, we ran them and they came back normal. And I just thought, not too sure about this. Again, not having a period for nearly coming up to that, 12-month time, but I just thought it was something or nothing. Again, stressful situations that were happening to us all.
Do you know, in your conversations with your doctor, did menopause even come up as a conversation topic, or when they were doing the blood tests, is it looking for anything else that might be abnormal?
And not really, and personally I was having some gynae issues, so there's a couple of things that I was looking into anyway, but not specifically really can remember the word menopause being mentioned. So I decided to go through my healthcare, had some further tests, and as I say, cut a long story short, ended up going down to London for an internal scan to have a look around inside my womb, and I think that was the day where everything changed really. And I just remember the sonographer, I think that's the right way to say it, saying to me, I can't see any eggs left in your ovaries, and I just thought, what the hell does that mean? So from that it was kind of like, gosh, what's happening to my body? I was coming up to 40 in a couple of months' time, so I'm 39, and I just thought, I'm aging, my body's giving up on me. So I went back through my gynae, and we sat down, and he just kind of said what he would recommend for my age, and having the early menopause before, the average age of the UK woman is 51. So I'd had POI, which is premature ovarian insufficiency. And they just advised that, I needed to get, my estrogen was that low. I remember the figure, it kind of feels like it'll never go away. It was 36, and I think an average is around about 150. And I just thought, what? like it was that low. So I needed to get going quick, really. My energy levels, I was very fatigued. I was very emotional, and I am an emotional person anyway, but even to the degree of I just cried at anything, and I just didn't know who I was in parts of that journey. So yeah, it was something that I needed to start listening and tuning into myself. But I think there's a lot of denial going on for me, a lot due to my age, I think, and just not knowing anything about menopause. I thought it was, probably like most of us, it was something that would happen to me in my mid-50s, and I'd start getting some symptoms, hot flushes, different feelings that you kind of relate to it, a couple of, the ones that jump out that you hear people say. But for me, quite a lot of my symptoms that I do look at the start, I think I'd ticked about 16 off a questionnaire at the start of it. That was before I even started looking into other things. And for me, it was down to even kind of, my skin changes, which I'd not even noticed. That I'm not really a kind of a spotty person, but I started to get some really, unusual spots under the skin. My skin felt really loose, and I just was creaking. My joints were really, really sore. That's how I put it. And I kind of felt like, what on earth? And I felt like in the mornings when I got out of bed, I had to warm myself up, to be honest. I'd kind of like need to do that stretch and just get going. And my girls would say, Mum, why are you walking like that? And I'd kind of be like, I'm okay, but I'm just not feeling great. So I guess all the symptoms and signs were there, but I wasn't taking note. So after that, I then was informed, and I know it's not everybody's informed choice, but for me, it was to start the HRT. So I started my regime, and I'd say within about 6 weeks, I was feeling some changes. I was feeling a little bit more myself.
6 weeks, that's such
a little
quick,
bit like, there was an intake. By the 3 months, I was definitely feeling like, wow, what's happening here? So, as I say, I was led by a professional. I know it's not everybody's informed choice, HRT, and there's a lot of myths about the old HRT, which I've learned through doing the coaching. But it was kind of like that was the right path for me. So I am now coming up to nearly 3 years.
Giving away your age now.
And how long I'll be on HRT, I don't know. But at the minute, I'm happy with the the way that it's working and helping me and my hormones, putting them back, body identical, and it's just what I used to produce that I don't have anymore. It's basically being put back in through my HRT regime. So as I say, there's lots of little bits of angles on that story, but just keeping it down to why I decided then that I needed to learn about menopause. Having 2 girls, it was so important for me, because they do say you kind of follow your mum's footprint in this, and I just thought, gosh, if my girls are going to think about having children in their late 30s, they could struggle. I'm not saying they will, but I just wanted to know everything I could about the word menopause. And I think I've gone a bit menopause mad, because it's kind of mentioned every day of my life at the minute. So I then decided that I wanted to educate myself on it. So I came across a coaching certificate online. Again, it was the COVID, just still in the COVID regimes of learning and everything. So I did that, and I felt within that space, I felt heard, I felt valued, validated. I didn't just feel like this statistic of this under 40, it kind of can't happen. The amount of people that said that to me, you can't be, in menopause, and I was like, I am. So within that space, I really felt like valued, and I'd met my tribe, if you want to call it. I felt probably was one of the younger ones on there. But every Thursday we'd do our lesson, and we'd go through the answers, and it would be, everything down from the endocrine system down to nutrition, lifestyle. We
took really science-based.
It was really, really good. And we'd have to do a test at the end of that, and you had to get, I think it was over 80%, or resit it. So it was, not just a show up and pass kind of course. And I remember I didn't want it to come to the end of that, because I just thought, I've really enjoyed this space, being validated, if you want to call it, with this group of amazing women that have actually made quite some good friendships within that space now. We've met up and everything. So that was, you know, something that I feel like I was grateful, if you want to say, to my early menopause for.
Yeah.
So yeah, from there I just decided that I just want to share that, you know, this can happen to anybody at any age.
Yeah.
Hearing, as I've researched more, you know, 13-year-old has had a menopause, maybe, yeah, it is surgical, or,
Yeah.
you know, different reasons why they've gone into that menopause, but, you know, it can happen, and it's not just this 51 average age in the UK.
And I think that is so important. You called yourself maybe menopause mad before, but there is nothing wrong with being that person that learns about it, talks about it, and brings it into conversation as much as possible. Obviously where relevant, you know, cooking tea tonight, menopause, you don't want to, but you know, bringing it into the common conversation, because it's so taboo. We've spoken before about how it is a taboo subject, whether that might be for cultural or different communities or faith-based reasons, but sometimes just maybe really old school traditional relationships and things.
Yes.
Maybe partners go, oh, we don't talk about girl stuff, women's stuff. No, we don't want to talk about that. Or mums, aunties, grandmas. It's just not spoken about, like sex, periods, those things that happen that are a part of life.
Yeah.
So the more we talk about it and normalise that, it's just making a gradual, even if it's a 1% a day change.
Absolutely.
It's needed. And you know, it used to be the case with mental health. I remember when I started with Health for Sure, and that was 6 years ago, the whole like aim and goal was, you know, we want to reduce the stigma of talking about mental health in the workplace, workplace specific. Now that stigma isn't really there. People will talk to their heart's content about their own mental health challenges, but people then don't know what to do with that information, like a manager or a colleague. They go, oh, they freak out a little bit. But now it's looking at additional areas and actual life milestones, and just, you know, the things that happen in life. So menopause is going to happen to an entire demographic at some point. That is not. It's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret. It's unavoidable for literally half of the population of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is still a stigma. People get icky, weird, uncomfortable about talking about it because they don't know or understand it. And that also could be the same for the person that is going to go through menopause or might be going through it. They don't feel educated. They don't feel comfortable. They don't know how people are going to respond, if they're going to get shut down when they talk about it. So when
scary.
Well, it is, because you worry about, are people going to judge me? I've apologies to my mum if she's going to hear this or watch this, but I remember her talking about going through the change, and that's what I'm going through the change. I never really understood what that meant. Didn't really understand the whole biology around it, and I don't think she did either. It was just in our community back at home, her and her friends and, you know, family members, it was just the change, but no one really knew what it was other than hot flushes and gynae changes, and I think she just felt just getting old overnight, I think is how she would refer to it, just aging overnight, and she just was exhausted, fatigued. But I think about that, even at that point, not educated, and wouldn't go into too much detail, or didn't feel comfortable finding out more information, wouldn't even go to the doctor, because it was just the change and just women and other females in her community, in her space, just like, oh, it's just the change, you've got to ride it out. Didn't know. And I always think now, like, gosh, if she was going through it now, she might have had a different experience because of slightly more education from GPs, healthcare professionals, and a little bit more education just in the general population because of how there's been some media awareness and stuff raised. But I still think it's going to take a little bit of time before people are, you know, people talk about anxiety, depression, quite comfortably, but menopause still isn't there yet.
No, there's a lot of noise going on, and I find within the space. and that's brilliant. You know, I need to get the noise going, but I still feel like we're so far off, so uneducated. And I think, you know, as well as women, I feel like we do need to take some responsibility for ourselves as well. You know, there's a lot of, if you want to call it, doctor criticising going on. You know, the NHS is on its knees, and you know, these doctors have got 7 to 8 minutes with you in that room.
It's crazy that it's that amount of time.
It really is. It's nothing. And you know, if we go in to these appointments not prepared, not forearmed, not knowing, or even kind of, you know, in a little bit of acceptance, then how are they to understand? So you can kind of, in a way, empathise why people are leaving with none the wiser on these symptoms and everything. So I do feel as when we do need to, you know, take a check of ourselves and just notice anything. And for me, the biggest thing is nothing is silly. Not one symptom. Don't think it's silly, because that could be that one thing that just makes you think, I need to go and speak to a healthcare professional about this. I did feel silly about some of the things, and you know, I look back now and think, gosh, I could have eased a lot of these symptoms if I'd have reacted quicker. But like I say, I feel like I was in a denial phase for a long while, just due to my age. You know, I was coming up to that 40s, that would be my prime, and I do believe I still am now. I've looked at it in a positive stint in a way. But yeah, there's a lot that goes around that, and there's this stigma, and like you say, you know, within families, if you've got, you know, a mum that's very reserved and doesn't share things with you, if you go into a friendship group and, you know, you're not heard and you don't feel like you can go and talk about, you know, your periods and different things, then really it's just going to carry on that knock-on effect into your older years. And, you know, into our midlife, we should be feeling like, you know, we were able to take these things. We have, it should be our, you know, our prime and our best thriving years. You know, for me personally, my girls are now growing up and at that stage where they don't need me as much. And you know, there's times where that upsets me that I'm not doing all those ponytails and making them look pretty, but still, you know, great, got independent girls, you know, they're doing all that. But I do feel like, you know, we should be embracing parts of this journey, and it is hard, it really is hard, and you do feel alone, and it's a lonely space, and, you know, the people that are living with you as well, it's hard for them, it's hard for your employees. How do they know how to support you? So I think there is a lot of noise, going back to the, you know, the point of it is being spoken about, and hopefully we can change this taboo around you know, the topic of it, because it is such a normal transition that will happen, you know, but it's, I hate the word normal actually, but you know, it's a transition that will happen to us as women. So we educate yourselves, get as much knowledge as you can before it happens, you know, learn before these things happen, because, you know, there is regimes out there that can be supported, you know, we can be supported by, and I'm sure the more we share and be honest within our homes, within our relationships with our children, within our relationships within our workplaces, you know, this can become something that is spoken about openly, without feeling like ashamed or anything.
Absolutely agree. You mentioned before as well, it's a very lonely process and lonely time. It can be a lonely experience. And I was looking earlier, and so it's estimated that literally right now that a third of the UK female population are peri or menopausal. And you think that is wild, considering that it is such a lonely experience. I think it was 13 million women at the moment are peri or menopausal, but for most of those individuals, they probably feel so alone in that journey, which is mind-boggling.
It really is. It kind of, like you say, it takes your breath a minute when you think this is happening and we're not sharing, we're going through it alone, or we might be sharing with that one friend or something, but you know, not seeking the medical professional help that we do need. You know, it's just like startling. The statistics are startling, and it's like, gosh, how have we got here, you know? And I personally feel that, you know, if you can get it into your head that your hormones are going to become towards that mid to end of your 30s, you know, there's going to be a depletion in that, and there will be changes, and you know, we need them to be within symphony with each other. You know, we need our estrogen and our progesterone to be working in nice harmony, and once that starts, we see those spikes and peaks and troughs come within that. You know, we need to take action. We need to be looking at it and thinking, right, okay, you know, I've noticed a change. I've noticed that I've seen a change within, you know, within your period, but you know, your cycle's changing. Track it. Make sure you're aware, and you're aware of all these, you know, points that you are noticing. You know, but like you say, it's a huge figure what's going on. It really is.
That no one's going through that together, even though that many people are going through it at the same time. They're not going through it together, which I think sounds quite symbolic, really.
Yes,
you know, the biological changes. You said mid to late 30s, those things can start changing in a woman. That's when it's really important to do things like tracking, so you can start, I guess, looking for anomalies or abnormalities.
Yes.
In your session, when you support people and work with people, do you support individuals that are peri or menopausal as well? Do you interact with them through your work?
So what I decided to do, personally, I just thought I need to share my story. So I set up a page on Instagram, and I just felt within that I was telling my story, and then this ripple effect obviously happens, and more people say, oh my gosh, you know, I can relate to some of that, or this could be happening to me, even though I'm, you know, have gone earlier than the UK average woman. So I felt like that was how I could get my voice out there in that place and space, and you know, it's a beautiful place to be, because you're finding that women are connecting with each other and sharing within that. And I feel like as well, you know, going into community centres and different areas, and you know, being that person holding, you know, a workshop, just an open day, come along, we're talking about this, come in, share, you know, there's no judgment held here, let's be together. And I think, you know, there's nothing more powerful than a group of women all sharing.
I know,
you know, it gives you real comfort, and yes, we've got this. So so that was how I feel that, you know, but I've heard so many different stories, and a lot, like you say, just going back to just not being aware, seeing the changes and just thinking, you know, it's not, and also the aftercare, the after support that, you know, isn't given when it's really, you just feel like you've just not been heard it's unfair that, like I say, we're having this kind of process within the 21st century, you know. It's really, really hard as it is. Women are taking on so much, you know, so many more roles. You know, we want to be working, we want to be part of, you know, the demographic. We want to be in that space. We don't want things like this to stop us coming to work. So there is a lot of changes and that needs to be adapted, and it's great that, you know, workplaces are starting to take on board and, you know, this topic, talk about it, have menopause policies, you know, a menopause champion within your workspace. If you can have somebody who, you know, people can go to, just to have that like person that they can go and have a listening ear, it's, you know, it's invaluable.
On menopause champions, just a random thing that came to my head, what do you think to like a combination of menopause champions, you know, male and female? Do you think that's a good direction to go for workplaces?
I do, and I think sometimes, again, it's within that workplace, I suppose, what you know, what your statistic is on that, but kind of having both is a really good idea. Some having the option there, yes, but also some women, like you say, sometimes you don't want to go to a male doctor for a, you know, a woman's problem, you know, gynae problem or something like that. You want to feel like, oh, you will understand me more. So I think having that is brilliant if, you know, people want to have both of the options there. But definitely having somebody there, you know, is really key. And someone that you can, you know, through the workplace, you can send them on these, you know, seminars, listening. There's so many things going on. You know, you're doing great work here at Health Assured, which is brilliant. And everything that, you know, you are being that supportive, partnership, and it is working in partnership with each other. Most of your day is at work.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
All your interactions are usually with your colleagues. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So, if you're going through this phase and feeling, oh my gosh, I can't talk to somebody, you're probably going to have those days where you feel like ringing in sick and not being there. So it really is key and crucial to have, that support and that person, definitely.
Yeah. If you don't feel either, this is not a shameless plug for the helpline by any means, it just makes me think, if you do feel you haven't really scoped out that person in work yet that is the champion, or you haven't got one yet, or you don't have a go-to that you can talk about that, 'cause it might be for you personally and your worries about what's happening to you in your body, or you might be a loved one or a friend of someone that's going through it and you go, I don't really know, I need to talk to someone about this and how it's impacting our relationship or our home. I don't know how to support my partner or whatever. Things like the EAP helplines, whether it's ours or someone else's, that's a really good port of call in terms of just having a soundboard as well and getting some hints and tips. All of our counsellors have gone through additional CPD and things like that. And we've had, it's like an 80% increase of menopause calls year on year. But a lot of those calls are from partners and spouse as well, going, how do I help? Like, this is, I don't think she realises what's happening to her, and those times, and like, thank goodness that they're actually speaking to someone to get that, rather than both of them suffering in silence, because they won't or don't know how to communicate about it because it's an awkward or uncomfortable topic. So those partners that are calling up are getting a little bit of encouragement from the counsellors on how to initiate those conversations and giving a bit of education and recommending places to look to find out more information and things like that. So I think that's a really good port of call, especially if you don't really know how to approach talking to someone about it, or just sounding out, or using someone as a soundboard. Basically,
like you say, sometimes it's just being heard, isn't it? Starting that conversation.
That validation that you felt when you went through that course.
Definitely.
I'm sure you want everyone to feel that same level of
it was. I
validation.
Just didn't feel like that. That statistic that I just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not. I'm me. I'm Emma. Treat me as Emma. So I feel like you say brilliant. Really sad. 80% you just said. And your call lines, wow, that's huge. But great for the people that are making those calls and just trying to find the way through this. Like you say, it can go on for a decade. That is a long time.
So that would be. Would you say is that the average time that an individual can go through?
There's not a real science behind it. It's but I suppose it's what your body, is going through at that stage, how much it's got rid of these hormones and everything. But it can, and it's, to think of that when, especially, you're struggling. Like that is, It's a huge point that needs addressing. And like you say, the quicker you can understand about it, the quicker you can educate yourself about it, and be as open as you can, even if you're a private person, the more that, you feel a little bit sane, I want to say, because you've shared it with somebody and they might say, oh my gosh, I've had that, or I had that symptom, or didn't think that. And it's just that ripple effect that we just need to keep getting it out there. That, we can help ourselves to a degree, but we also need to seek that professional, advice. And there's some amazing, menopause specialists out there that are doing brilliant work within doctors, as well as outside privately. But again, we need to get that training in for these doctors. It needs to be more than what they've learned already and touched on in a couple of hours.
This is it. It feels like I've spoken with a couple of people just over the years, just in my role as a manager, and some individuals they've almost come in and done a cartwheel because they're like, you never guess what, we've got a practice nurse or a district nurse that will come into the GP surgery that is a menopause specialist, so I've got someone I can talk to now. But that seems like it's such a needle in a haystack or a golden, the golden egg, a golden nugget of resource, but that surely should be like a standard practice within things like GP practices and community healthcare and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think like you say, you feel like you don't know what they've learnt on their degree and everything like that, but you just think it would have been more covered. You'd think, gosh, why is that only had a couple of hours or whatever training on it. It's just so I do believe that it starts within education. And I do also, there's the amazing Diane Danzebrink who's campaigning for grassroots. She's amazing, and she's got this policy within the government that will be taught within the schools and everything. It did start to happen, and then again lockdown came along. So if we can get that going within our scope of education on sex education and everything like that to be discussed, then I just feel that learning it at that stage, it's going to take you right the way through your years, and it won't be such a daunting situation because you'll have heard about it. I can remember it was always like the laugh when the nurse come into school and you'd be laughing with the boys and oh my gosh, what we're going to discuss. But okay, there's a laugh around it, but it's still some of valuable information that has kept with me from that time. So usually the horrible images that they put up of the things, definitely. This is what happens and you don't use protection. Definitely the horror stories.
But you do those things stick with you because they're so out of the norm for what you do at school. Maths, English, they stick with you because it's real life as well.
Definitely.
And you might not, there's going to be a substantial period of time from your school years to hopefully substantial period of time before you then go through menopause and might support someone through menopause, but it can help them with their immediate family, maybe their mum, auntie, and grandma or whatever, going through that, and they're wised up to it, and they can be in another form of support or just understanding. I think that's what's happening with mum. That makes sense, right?
The biggest joy that I get is I've done a few talks within workplaces, and the young girls have come along and I'm like, brilliant, I love this. And they'll come up at the end and they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm going to go home and hug my mum. And I'm like, oh, why, that is brilliant. That my job's done kind of thing. In that, because they're thinking, gosh, that's what mum's going through. She's not just a moody bugger. She's just, she's struggling. So it's, it goes, it's such a knock-on effect with it and everything we're doing. Like you say, from relationships down to coming into work, down to looking after yourself and trying to get through, that day. I do think education.
I agree. I agree. There was just a couple of other things that I wanted to touch on very briefly, because one thing that I thought of when you talked about egg depletion, completely have no eggs, things like that. I don't think people realise perhaps that's what menopause indicates, is the end of a window of fertility as well. I guess this could be a whole episode in itself, talking about fertility and menopause and things, but women seem to be having children later. A lot of women are having, and a lot of couples are having children later on in life, because I feel like there's a shift with millennials in particular, where they are focusing on the travel in the career. COVID made us lose a few years, so they're trying to catch up on that and having a nice time as a potentially child-free individual. And it's something that I think about as well. There's a significant age difference between my partner and I. I'm a bit of a cougar. I think that's the term for it. And it's all right for guys because they can carry on being fertile in most cases till they're 70, 80. But there is a window for women typically, and I think it's something that I think people should not to scare people or to get scared or frightened about, but be mindful of thinking about the tracking of things like periods and stuff like that. That's kind of what I was linking in here is absolutely you go for it, you live the life that you want to live, and maybe one day you want to consider children and looking at those options and what that looks like for you. So a real practical step sounds like it would be start as soon as you can, just tracking your general, biological functions like your periods, how you're looking after yourself. Don't be going, on mad diets just for aesthetic things, and to look after your body, nurture your body, and start looking and journaling, even maybe your moods. Even people have journal trackers and all sorts, don't they?
Absolutely.
Just like anxiety today, low mood today, whatever it might be. And take regular stock of what's going on. Every couple of months, look at mood changes, any fluctuations in periods, and just start educating themselves in case they might need to start conversations with medical professionals around fertility, around any gynae checks and reviews and things like that.
Even keeping up to date with your smears, people that miss smears, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a couple of minutes out your day. And that fear that brings, it shouldn't really hurt you, even that kind of down to, if your estrogen is lacking within, in your vagina, it's kind of like that shouldn't be an uncomfortable thing that you process, the smear and everything like that. So, localized estrogens, all those things that me personally, I've never heard of. I wasn't aware that you can be doing this, It's so important, and any change is a change. So like you say, writing that down, tracking it, having an app. There's lots of different things until you look that you can actually do. But my message is that basically your body is a vessel, and it gives you the signs. And if you don't take signs and take note, then it'll take note for you. So, unfortunately, sometimes it's at the detriment of, you've gone too far with things. So definitely be really aware of everything. And like you say, unfortunately, as a woman, our body clock is on a timer. And for me, did I want any more children? No, I'm very blessed and very grateful. I've got 2 girls. But part of it was that it felt like, oh my gosh, I can't do that anymore.
Had no choice.
Had no choice. It was taken. So so it's there is lots of different elements and layers that come with this. So think about yourselves, and like you say, people might be having that fun and that time earlier now, and not not planning on children, but just think about every step, and how it could I hate to say worst case, but how things can be, and just look at, what your plan is, exactly in that way. I think, girls are having periods earlier, and 9-year-olds now having periods, And when I was at school, it was probably the average was like 14, and if you'd not, it was kind of like that was okay. But now, there's so much that's changed, and there's so many different layers to this. It's not just, looking at your menopause and you think, it's looking at lifestyle, it's looking at your nutrition, all these are key into that. So, looking after your bones. For me personally now, I have to have a DEXA scan to check my bone health for osteoporosis. So I have to be, more in check with myself, which, I never thought that would, be me again, but still it's there. So, I will make sure that those tests are done, talking off kind of menopause, but our breast checks, our mammograms, not missing these key appointments, and making sure we know how many years we should be checking ourselves. Even the coil, checking how many years you've had it, inserted. Is it at its depletion? Where am I at? There's like lots of layers, and because we're busy and we're not always focusing on that, which probably should be the main focus for a lot of us at times, we put that on the back burner, looking after families, looking after, looking after everybody maybe, but putting yourself last on that pecking order, it needs to go to the top of that list. Where am I up to at the start of my year? Okay, what needs to be checked this year? Oh, right, my smear's due. Right, better make that appointment. And I think we have to take some control for ourselves, definitely. Just try and make this, transition smooth as it can be.
Yeah. I made a lot of mental notes and physical
Okay,
notes. They're like, right, need to check this, need to check that, need to check this.
Yeah, no,
but you know, life just flies by, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, especially when we had 3 years-ish, 3-4 years since, you know, since the pandemic, and that felt like a gap in everyone's life that we, you know, time that just didn't exist, or time that was lost, or it was so bizarre that everyone is still playing catch up. In my head, I'm 4 years younger than what I am, and 4 years can make a big difference to someone. You know, you think, oh, 4 years, what's that? But, you know, fine lines, wrinkles, all these types of things, you know, my fatigue, energy levels, things like that. Absolutely. Changing massively.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, this sounds quite superficial, but the elasticity of skin and how hair feels, so those things are changing. And I'm like, how is that? I'm only 20 something years old, but I'm not. I'm in my 30s now, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to start thinking about this, because what I worry about, and this isn't to put pressure on anyone that's listening or watching, to be like, think about having children as soon as possible. But if you think that's a possibility in your life that you might want to consider, not necessarily here and now, do the things that you can to, you know, protect yourself as much as possible, look out for changes, because it just made me think, when you had your diagnosis, and fortunately you were in a headspace where I wasn't trying for children, but there might be people that are then diagnosed early with early menopause who are like, I was and my friends are all having babies now, and I can't. And I think, gosh, that must be something that's really hard, because that's a period of grief almost that you could go through when you're watching all your friends, your girlfriends going through pregnancies and stuff. Absolutely. And you're like, I wanted to do it at the same time as all them, but my body's decided we're going down a different route. Yeah.
I never forget the moment in the gynae room with him, and I got a bit tearful, and I said, why now at 40? And he just said, I've had a 21-year-old in this room, and it put me right back in my place and back into perspective of, gosh, you know,
makes you, it's like an epiphany moment, like realise what you have, and rather than what you don't have.
Exactly. And it was just I'll never ever forget that day, because it was, you know, I think we're entitled to have our little bits of down days and things, and whatever, but it was just like, right, okay, and I know I'm blessed, and I've got, you know, two girls and everything like that, but, you know, it's like you say, it's everything, we're living differently to, you know, our mums and dads and our nanas and granddads. So much has changed, and there's so many options for us, so you know, do enjoy everything, but just be aware of everything as well. And I think a key message again is for me, what I'm saying, I wish I'd probably trained and got a little bit like in my early 30s, done that weight training, you know, and looked after, you know, I am now, and looking after my bones and, you know, my bone health a lot more. But it's kind of classed as, you know, getting, I think, this stigma again, like you say, magazines and all the things have got lots to blame for it, media, but, you know, this perfect body and, you know, what it is, and the look, and being, you know, bigger isn't good, but being stronger, use that word, stronger is best. So get yourself strong, and if you're in your 30s and, you know, you are in your prime, because everything's going, but, you know, as those, I felt like from 37, there's a few things started to change to me. No, just to me personally. I started to notice a few things, and and I think now looking back, I was obviously starting within that perimenopause, but I wasn't aware of that. So again, get yourself, you know, get yourselves moving, movement. Get you know, keep that, and look at your nutrition. Look what you are putting in. There's so many books, so many resources, podcasts now. Gosh, you could spend a whole day, many days on it now. What is out there? But start listening to those things. You know. If you've got a minute, I always put a podcast on in the car. Start listening and learning little things about, you know, midlife, if you want to call it, you know, and what changes can happen as midlife, you know, not a midlife crisis that we're try and say, but, midlife pointers, and just start taking note of, anything that you can do to support yourself. Supports everybody else. It supports everybody in your family. It supports everybody at work. It supports just everything, but mainly it supports you.
Before we round up, I think just what would be your top tips for someone that suspects they might be doing the tracking, maybe they've not done the tracking, they just know their body, and intuitively they know when there's changes and stuff. Maybe periods have stopped, or there are other symptoms that are rearing themselves, what would be the first kind of port of call? What would you tell that person to go and do first? Would it be doctors? Like, what would be?
Yeah, I think the first protocol is, it's, I think so at the start, nothing is silly, nothing is like, I'll look daft if I say that. Be writing it down, be tracking. It doesn't have to be always on an app. Piece, pen and paper, old school, go for it. Write down anything that you've noticed. Like you say, me, I didn't even put it to that point, but hair was coming out. Just thought, it's a changing of the seasons, my hair's just, it needs a cut or whatever. It was coming out in its masses, and it was like, gosh. So all these, as I say, the body is telling you these signs. So take note, seek medical advice. There's a lot of scaremongering and different, information that is being passed. So always go to that professional. Go armed. Go in saying, this is my symptoms, so you've noted them, and be ready for that next question, because you've got that short space of time to basically say, take any medications that you're on, so you've got that noted down as well. And if you are happy and you want to be on HRT, but go in saying, I'd like to know more about HRT, so that the healthcare professional does know that you've actually done some work on it before you've got there. I always say, ask for a double appointment if you can in your surgery, because you want that little bit longer space. Take somebody with you. In that moment, I think, for me personally, I get a bit of white coat syndrome sometimes, going over blood pressure, and it's, gosh, it always goes really high. Take somebody with you to your appointment so that you've got another ear that's listening in. If you leave that appointment and you feel that you've not been heard, or you've left with something, medication or something that you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm none the wiser, ask to see another practitioner. You don't have to stick to that one person. Get a second opinion. You value yourself. You're valued. Literally, ask. It's not abnormal to ask to see somebody else. But we're scared, and there's different. There's so many different elements. I think those are the key ones. I would say, if you are noticing anything, and talk to somebody. Don't feel alone. It is lonely. I had those lonely moments. But literally, your friends want to listen. They want to help. Your parents, they want to support you. Your partners, they don't want to feel pushed out. Even if it's just I know you can't understand it. How can you? Our bodies, our anatomy is so different. But please just listen. Or just having that supporting ear is so important. Don't feel alone, please, and take care of yourselves, because, as I say, we've got one body. Look after it. Look after it with love. Look after it with nutrition. Look after it with movement and care for yourselves. It's we have so much responsibility as women. We're taking on huge roles, but try and put you first.
It's brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.